All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this evening. In addition to beginning in the name of Allah and sending salutations on our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we are taught in the adab of our deen, I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which I'm on and pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging of the lands, both here in Adelaide, the Ghana peoples, and those of us that are joining from Sydney and from Melbourne. Welcome to our webinar this evening. This webinar series is entitled Journey to Distinction, and it is a series of webinars that is giving us an opportunity to delve into our stimulus paper entitled A Shared Vision for Islamic Schooling in Australia, Learners, Learning, and Leading Learning. Many of you have probably accessed the reading, the stimulus paper. Some of you, I'm sure, have been engaging with it in your schools. And if you don't have it, inshallah, we can share the link in the chat during the webinar. This webinar series is meant to be an opportunity to really dig in to the stimulus paper. The stimulus paper came about a few years back, as Brother Dylan spoke about in our first webinar, where he gave some background about how this stimulus paper came about. But the idea was really for us to articulate our own aspiration and our own articulation of what it means to educate in Islamic schools. It was meant to give us our meta language, and it brought together educators, scholars, nationally and internationally, that contributed to the shaping of this stimulus paper that we think, or we feel, really provides that sense of clarity for parents and for community on the broader purpose of Islamic schooling in Australia. It's designed for us to increase our commitment of educators in a time and in an age where we're struggling as a field of education to continue to have educators feel connected to and have a strong sense of efficacy in Islamic schools. And it's meant to result in a coherent educational experience for young people who we know collectively in Islamic schools, we're aspiring for a holistic education. This stimulus paper is intended to give us that meta language that gives us a sense of coherence in what we do in Islamic schools. So this webinar series has been designed to do a few things. One is for us to, in each webinar series, for either myself or Brother Dylan Chown, my colleague, to advance or to explain one aspect within the stimulus paper, really to give you a taster, or to give you a sense of what's inside the stimulus paper and why it matters. The second is for us to bring together leading scholars in the field of Islamic education to help deepen our understanding of some of the key concepts and perspectives that define education in the Islamic tradition. And the third is for us to engage with school leaders across Australia, and how they are journeying to distinction, or journeying towards a sense of renewal or tajdeed within Australian Islamic schools. So for tonight, our program will do just that, inshallah. I will share in the first couple of minutes some reflections on what this journey toward distinction entails, and why we've termed it a journey to distinction. I will then pass it around 7:10 Adelaide time. I'll pass it over to Dr. Samir Mahmoud, who's joining us to speak about Tarbiya as soul making, and to really deepen our conceptual understanding of the concept of Tarbiya and what it means to educate for Tarbiya. And then we will close our webinar this evening with a dialogue with Miss Aynur Simsirel from Ilim College to talk about Ilim College's journey to distinction. At the very end, we will have an opportunity for some discussion and some dialogue. And throughout the webinar, we ask that if you have questions, comments, thoughts that come to your mind, feel free to post them in the chat so that when we get to the discussion period, we can jump right in. To reiterate something I said, the stimulus paper, like other faith communities and other educational institutions, the stimulus paper was or is intended really to do three things. One, it's to stimulate reflection on our purpose and our aspirations in Islamic schooling. Secondly, it's to cultivate reconnection, and that reconnection is to reconnect with the rich and vibrant tradition of education within Islam. And thirdly, through this stimulation and cultivation, it's to inspire renewal within our Islamic schools um, in a way that builds on the legacy and the impact that our schools have made to date and starts to really aspire to think about what are the next 50 years of Islamic school going to look like. To do that, I'll speak very briefly about this concept of distinction. And these are 2 pages that are just not meant to be read at this point, but they're taken directly from the stimulus paper to give you a feel of the stimulus paper. But in the introduction of the stimulus paper, we write about these phases of distinction or these phases of growth that Australian Islamic schooling has progressed through. And it's similar to many other contexts across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and other places where Islamic schools have grown. We've gone through similar phases, but we articulate it in 3 ways. We say in the stimulus paper that we've gone from the establishment phase, where Islamic schools were first vying to just prove to parents and community that we have the right infrastructure, we have the right qualifications, we have the right accreditation. We wanted to establish ourselves to show that we have the right pillars in place to be able to be called an authentic, a valid, credible school. And that was in the early 1980s in Australia, where we saw many of our Islamic schools first get established. The second phase came in and around 9/11, where there was a real sense of scrutiny about what's being taught in Islamic schools. And there was this need to establish a sense of belonging. One, for the learners in our schools, for Muslim learners to acknowledge that they belong. And this was achieved through significant shifts towards civic engagement and community programs, community outreach programs that many Islamic schools initiated, as well as that we belong academically, that we can hold our own. And we've proven that. And we know now that in many of our Islamic schools, we've proven, one, that we can hold ourselves academically, if not exceed national standards. We've shown that we have exemplary infrastructure in school buildings and learning environments. And we've shown that we have passionate and inspired educators who work in Islamic schools. So then why the need for distinction? The phase that we are currently labeling ourselves is we've currently moved into a phase of distinction because distinction allows us to reconnect in a deep way with the Islamic tradition. And we feel that we are at a juncture now in the growth of Islamic schools where we have an opportunity to do something special. We recognize that we have the right foundations in place, and it's an opportunity now to ask ourselves, how do we distinguish ourselves at a very deep level where our faith is intertwined and at the very root of the foundation of the work that we do to educate young people. So this aspiration to distinction is a call for educators, parents, learners, community members to ask ourselves, what is it that makes education in the Islamic tradition so special, so unique, and so essentially distinct, which is why we're calling the phase of distinction. So tonight's webinar gets us thinking about key concepts within the Islamic tradition, within the Islamic tradition that speak about education. And again, 2 more pages out of the stimulus paper that are not necessarily meant to be read at this stage, but to give you a sense that there are concepts that we try to advance in the stimulus paper that are meant to just whet the appetite. So we give very brief um, definitions and conceptualizations of things like tarbiya or ta'deeb or ta'aleem or tazkiyah and many other concepts that shape the work that we do in Islamic education. And tonight is an opportunity for us to take one of those concepts with the support of our guest speaker tonight, who I will turn to now. I'd like to introduce us to Dr. Samir Mahmoud, who is a close friend, a dear friend, and mentor of mine, and for many of us, I think, across Australia and globally, because Dr. Samir is somebody that has taught and continues to teach both community programs and programs in Islamic studies as the academic director of Usul Academy. He's also continues to lecture in the diploma in Islamic psychology at Cambridge Muslim College in the UK. And I won't read his entire bio, but suffice it to say that Samir has touched the hearts and minds of many of us, and we look forward to an opportunity, Dr. Samir, to hear from you this evening and to benefit from the topic that's been provided as Tarbiya, as soul making. Over to you, Dr. Samir.
بارك الله فيكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد بن عبد الله أفضل الصلاة والتسليم. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Nadeem, for such a very generous introduction, and thank you for providing a springboard of ideas from which I can then launch into this presentation, inshallah. I hope you can all see my full screen slides. Tarbiya as soul making. So I liked it when you mentioned the idea of a journey to distinction, because I do think we're at a critical juncture in the history and development of Islamic schooling, Islamic education. And we need to transition into this phase aided by and armed with a new renewed sense of niyyah, but also a renewed sense of concepts and ideas derived from our very rich tradition. I'd like to first actually start with an acknowledgement. I'm glad you made the acknowledgement of country, but I want to make an acknowledgement of several colleagues that I've had many dialogues with ever since I transitioned into the field of Islamic education about 5-6 years ago. So many ideas that stand out in this presentation are a result of this wonderful dialogue with these colleagues. Any errors and mistakes, of course, are mine and mine only, inshallah. So the structure of the presentation really is a twofold. I want to try to answer two questions in this presentation. I thought several ways of how I could do it, but I landed on this one at the end. I want to first very briefly define what I think education is. There are many definitions of education or Tarbiya. I'm not going to get too much into the etymology of the words necessarily, or the history and how it differs from some of the other terms that Dr. Nadeem just mentioned, like ta'aleem, ta'deeb, tazkiyah, tahqiq, etc. But I'm using here Tarbiya in its general understanding and meaning, which is equivalent to education. And then I want to, from there, move on to a very important question: what is the human being? Many of us assume we know what the human being is, but our education systems don't seem to be geared towards educating the entirety of the human being, at least as we understand the human being in the Islamic tradition. So, what do we mean by Tarbiya? And what do we mean when we say Tarbiya is a process of soul making? Interestingly enough, the term Tarbiya or education in both English and Arabic refer to two complementary processes. The first process is to cultivate the process of drawing in the outside world into us. So education is two moments, two steps, two processes, let's say, that are complementary. One is how we guide the process of drawing in the world. So we as human beings, we breathe in the world. We draw in influences, whether they're social, whether they're cultural, whether they're environmental, whether they're spiritual from the unseen world, whether they're from the realm of, let's say, shaitan, etc. We are creatures that are porous. We're not completely, how should we say, impermeable. We're actually porous individuals who are open to influences from the outside world. And when we mean outside world, we're not just referring to the physical domain, alam al-mulk. We're also referring to the intermediate world, alam al-malakut, and also beyond that. So, so education then is partly guiding or cultivating this process of growing in the world into us. The second aspect of education or tarbiyah is to cultivate the process of drawing out. We not only breathe in, but also there's a process of breathing out. So, and breathing out really is here meant in the sense of education is also a process of cultivating how we bring out or actualize the latent possibilities within us and how we bring them out into the world and actualize. And later on, I'm going to use the image of a seed that unfolds to kind of really highlight this idea. So we can quickly then define education or tarbiyah as a dual process of drawing in the world, both the seen world or the unseen world, and all the influences and factors involved, and drawing out into the world that which is within us, particularly how we cultivate certain kind of practices, ideas, dispositions, virtues, forms of knowledge that allow us to actualize that seed so it can mature and grow into fruition. Um, um, that being, of course, to actualize ahsan taqweem, the full possibilities of the human being as a insan mustakhlaf fil ard or a khalifa in the earth, in the land. But what an Islamic worldview teaches us, what the Islamic perspective teaches us, is that the interior world and the external world are much richer and much more multidimensional than what secular education usually refers to. So when we talk about the interiority and bringing that out, we're talking about not just our internal ideas and thoughts, but the entire interior world that links us all the way up to through alam al-malakut and alam al-lahu. Right? So there's a vast realms of interiority we are talking about. And there are also vast realms of exteriority. So education really is guiding, cultivating the process of that inward movement and outward movement, drawing in and drawing out, breathing in and breathing out. Education covers both these moments. I like this expression here, the acorn wants to become an oak tree, because we all are coming to this world with a set of potentialities that seek to be actualized in this world. So in the world of creation, therefore, the whole process of drawing in, drawing out is most evident in the journey of the seed, which draws in the world to the nutrients, the sunlight, and the myriad of environmental factors, after which it draws out and unfolds its essence so it may bear its fruit after the process of growth is complete. So the fruit is already contained in the seed in potentia. So like the seed, and the Quran gives us many analogies to trees and plants and gardens, natural analogies, because there's a correspondence between these natural symbols or signs, ayat, and ourselves. So in the same way that the plant grows vertically upwards and downwards, and in the darkness of the soil, it draws in the nutrients, and also through the leaves and the branches, it draws in carbon and all sorts of different other elements from the air and water, etc. And in the darkness of that kind of soil, it gradually sprouts out above the surface and begins to differentiate into the distinct tree that it is under the influence of various environmental factors. Likewise, the human beings grows out of the darkness of the womb and emerges into this world, and gradually through a series of differentiations over the lifespan and various milestones, our ego, our identity begin to become differentiated from the primordial kind of, let's say, undifferentiated state in our early childhood, and becomes gradually, until by the age of 18, 19, 20, 21, we become very distinct individuals with a distinct sense of I or identity. So the dual moments of drawing in from the outside and drawing out from the inside constitute the process that defines the growth, maturation, and actualization of all natural things, including human beings. Okay, so this is the process of education. Now we understand what this process of education actually is. I want us now to reflect on what is the human being. And then while I'm talking about what is the human being, I want you to reflect, if this is the human being, then what implications does that have in terms of drawing in and drawing out? So there are a number of ways in which in the Islamic tradition we can talk about the human being. Uh, and it's important to emphasize this point at this moment. When I say there are many ways, I mean there are literally many, many, many different ways of looking at the human being. We're very rich, very complex creatures that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Um, but I want to share here a number of perspectives. And it's not exhaustive, there are many others. But I want to show you how, if we draw on the richness, the vast richness and diversity of the Islamic tradition, how we can extract today many perspectives that are of immediate educational relevance for schooling today. So what do we mean by when we say the human being? What is the being of this human being? I'm going to give you a number of definitions. There are many others, but the first is one potential way of looking at the human being is to say the human being consists of a spirit, a ruh, that is breathed, nafakha. The Quran says nafakha, wa nafakhna fihi, into a body, a jism, by God, and endowed with a fund of natural and innate possibilities, which is the fitrah, that seek fulfillment and actualization tahqiq over the seasons of an individual's lifespan. A very comprehensive definition, I think, about what the human being actually is. We're essentially a ruh, but that ruh then is breathed into and manifests in the physical world through being present in a body. So the ruh governs the body, and this is all granted to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ruh comes into this world, and when it's breathed into the body, it brings with it a set of, or a fund of natural and innate potentialities, possibilities, dispositions, the fitrah. So we don't come into this world as a tabula rasa. We don't come into this world empty. We come to this world with innate possibilities that seek to be actualized. But these various possibilities of our innate nature or fitrah seek actualization at various moments and different moments or different developmental stages of our lifespan. In classical Islamic tradition, we call the life of the individual mawasim al-umr, seasons of life, or the seasons of an individual's life cycle through this world. A very beautiful image because it suggests that from the very beginning, the ruh is working its way through our existence. It guides the development of the fetus in the womb, the ruh being our essence, and it carries with it a variety of different possibilities, including, according to many scholars, including the initial vision and witnessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or witnessing of the encounter with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which the Quran refers to as the day of Alast, or Alastu bi Rabbikum, when we stood before our Lord and he said, Alastu bi Rabbikum, and we said, Bala. So we come into this world with a memory, a distinct memory, or traces of an encounter with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a witnessing, a shuhudi moment. But also we come into this world as a manifestation of a variety of different divine names, right? So we come into this world already ennobled and already with so much that we are enriched with. You can also say that the human being, as I just said, manifests all the divine names, al-asma, and is the pinnacle of creation, a Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. We're a Khalifa because we possess a ruh. We're a Khalifa because we manifest all the totality of the divine names in a way that no other creature in existence does. The human being is also, this is another image we can dwell on and draw out its implications in education, which are huge. The human being is a creature that is a microcosm. أتحسب أنك جرم صغير وقد انطوى فيك العالم الأكبر. This is saying from Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. We are a microcosm of the macrocosm. نحن جرم صغير of what? Of the macrocosm, العالم الأكبر. And so we contain within us the totality of the created world, the created order. Now, it's very difficult for us to understand, mired as we are in a very kind of materialist worldview, positivist, reductionist, etc. But unless we recover the richness of this multi-layered, multi-level view of existence in which the human being participates, it's going to be very difficult for us to really develop our own indigenous educational philosophy and framework that informs, therefore, what we teach and how we teach it and when we teach it in our schools. Another way, and I'm going to break this down a little bit more, we can look at the human being as obviously consisting of three components. They're not really three distinct components. The human being is a unified single reality, But we can say that the human being has a ruh, which is the essence. We have a body, which is a physical world. But when the ruh manifests in a body and intermingles with it, that aspect of the ruh that mingles with the body, we call the soul, the nafs, right? And of course, what this does is this tripartite view of the human being means that we coexist simultaneously in multiple levels of reality. We don't just exist in the physical world, right? The physical world grants us through the five senses access to the physical world around us, but we're not only inhabiting a physical world. So what does education mean when we say that we don't inhabit only a physical world? It means that there are other faculties within us in the realm of the soul, in the realm of the spirit, that require our careful attention in any educational process. And these difficult faculties, or the different modes of perception, or the different capacities for perceiving and knowing, are functions of different aspects of our being. Right? Our qalb is essentially a spiritual reality. Though our physical qalb, our physical heart, is part of our body. When we refer to the qalb, of course, in the Islamic tradition, we're really referring to the innermost reality that is spiritual and is part of our spiritual capacities. When we talk about feelings, for example, a feeling, though it manifests in a body, feelings exist within the realm of our soul life, right? We have imagination also. In imagination, there are two different types of imagination. There's imagination that belongs to the lower nafs. There's imagination that belongs to the higher nafs, which is where we touch upon the realm of the ruh. There we have memories, we have intellect, we have spiritual intuition, etc., etc. So we have various modalities. The question to education experts is, what aspects of these faculties, how many of these faculties are we actually educating in our schools? How many are we actually taking into account? This is a very important question because we can't really, therefore, complain when our youth in their late teens and early university, their qalb, their heart doesn't work, they can't perceive beyond the physical world. Did we ever educate them to cultivate the heart as a mode of perception? Did we ever cultivate the practice of tazkiyah? Did we ever assist them and teach them in the polishing of the heart in order for it to be able to then pierce beyond the physical and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? To what extent do we train the imagination? To what extent do we develop all these other faculties, the higher intellect, for example? So again, I have another image here, which is also derived from the classical Islamic tradition. And it's another way of looking at the human being, right? Earlier I said, you can see here on the right-hand side, that the human being consists of a body, soul, and a spirit. But we can also say that the human being also consists of different levels within the soul. There's, according to some classical scholars, we have a mineral soul, nafs ma'daniyya, and this nafs ma'daniyya relates to the mineral physicality of our body. Our body consists of minerals, right? And we share that with the rest of the physical world. But we also consist of a vegetative soul. Basically, vegetative soul in classical thought refers to those life forces within us that govern the process of nutrition, growth, and healing. So from the fetus, and when the child is born, and as the child goes up to the age of 21 and 22, etc., there are these life forces that are, growing, that are guiding the process of nutrition, growth, and healing of the body, the metabolism, etc. All these are very fascinating processes, and it's important to understand what is happening within the child as the child is growing up, when it is happening, because understanding what is happening and when it's happening helps us to understand what to teach and when to teach it. The human being also possesses also nafs hayawaniyya. That's usually associated with basic instincts and forces like hunger, thirst, sexual drive, fear, etc. And that's associated also with our nervous system, rudimentary inner feelings. That mainly drives instinct and impulses. So when the scholars tell us you have to discipline the nafs al-hayawaniyya, what they mean is not eliminate it, but bring it under the sway of the human soul. And that's al-insaniyya and nafs al-aqila. Because all these aspects of our being, the mineral soul, the vegetative soul, the animal soul, they constitute fundamental processes, or they reflect fundamental processes that are happening within us. And each one of these as different developmental milestones throughout the life of the child. So, for example, in the animal soul, the sexual desire and drive doesn't really emerge in a child until the early teens, for example, right? It's important to know that. It's also important to know when, for example, um, certain types of feelings emerge within the child. It's also important to understand, for example, when we talk about the human soul here, nafs al-insaniya, at what stage of a child's development when we train the will, the irada, because the will, the sense of unique identity, the sense of being a rational being and self-aware, these are functions of the ruh. These are functions of the ruh because that's what defines us as human beings as opposed to the rest of the kingdoms of nature. When do we train the aql? You can't speak in a rational sense to a child who's not yet developed cognitive capacities, for example. At what age do we train the will? When does it really emerge? When are we able to actually directly address the will of the child? These are all very important questions that we have to take into account, and a classical tradition provides some guidance and indications on this. And like I said, there are many, many other possible ways of looking at the human being that can enrich our educational understanding of the child and the processes unfolding within the child. Why is it that, for example, a child at a certain age, he tends to draw a lot and paint a lot? Why is it that they cultivate a sense of imagination more than at another age? Why is it that at a certain age, for example, a child demands explanations through logic and reason? And they don't demand it at another age, for example. So knowing all these are very important, and laying out the different functions of the soul or different aspects of the soul in this particular way that I'm pointing out allows us to see that what is developing at the level of the body, what is developing at the level of sensory motor skills, what is developing at the level of emotions, when is it developing, what is developing at the level of moral capacities, cognitive functions, etc., etc. The last slide I want to share with you here is what are the indication implications of some of these? We talk about the mineral soul, the vegetative soul, the animal soul, the human soul. We're talking about each one of these has to be educated and addressed in a different way, right? For example, when we talk about vegetative soul, and to a certain extent the animal soul, balance and rhythm are very, very important to be cultivated in the child, whether it's linking it to the rhythms of nature, or whether it's rhythms of actions, rhythms of the day, rhythms of the hour. Salat, of course, is beautiful when it comes to regulating the rhythm of a child. They're very, very important. The rhythm and regulation of breathing. Breathing changes and alters in the child from different age. Nutritional balance, very important. Physical balance, health, etc. When and how do we cultivate sense of ethics and akhlaq? At different ages, we teach akhlaq differently. We can't teach ethical theory to a child, a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, but we teach akhlaq in a different way, indirectly, right? We educate the will also in a different way. We educate the heart in a different way, aql, etc. I don't have time, unfortunately, to get into details. I just wanted to share these ideas. So we go back to our understanding of education as a drawing in and drawing out. Education then becomes a very sophisticated, precise science of understanding the human being in their fullness, so the understanding full aspects of the human being, the body, the soul, the spirit, and within the body, all the processes that are happening, within the soul, all the processes that are happening and faculties of perception, etc., etc. Understanding all these helps understand how we can regulate the process and guide the process of drawing in, and then therefore drawing out or actualizing the full possibilities that we contain within us at the moment of inception, at the moment of the fitrah, at the moment that the ruh has breathed into our bodies, inshallah. There's a lot more that I can say. I only have 20 minutes, inshallah, but maybe at a future date we can elaborate in more detail, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that, Dr. Samir. MashaAllah, you've given us lots of food for thought, and I'm sure we'll have a little bit of time in the discussion to dig into this. And for those of you that would like even more, Dr. Samir will be presenting at our annual conference in Brisbane in August, and I think it'll be an extension, inshallah, to a lot of the thoughts that he's shared here. But I think some of the key things that you've allowed us to expand our understanding of just tarbiya as nurturing or as soul making, but actually thinking about each of the different faculties. And as you said, which of these faculties are we nurturing in our schools? and also thinking about the processes of what's developing in the human being and when, I think are really important questions for us to deliberate on. Inshallah, we have a little bit more time to do that shortly. I'm going to move to the next segment of our webinar today, which is a conversation with Ms. Aynur Simsirel, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Ilim College. Again, I'm not going to read the bio, but please do when you have a chance. Ms. Aynur is a pioneer, a critical figure in the field of education, of Islamic schooling in Australia, a great friend and mentor of Sight and myself. And we are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us for this conversation. Ms. Aynur brings significant experience, over 20 years of experience in leading Islamic schools in different leadership positions at Ilim College. She's also worked for about 6 years at the independent schools, Victoria, and has tremendous experience around accreditation, executive coaching, and organizational improvement. One of the first things that Ms. Aynur did when she returned to Ilim College recently in the position of CEO is she undertook a process of renewal or re-envisioning the school's mission, vision, and values with the support of the leadership team and the educators across Ilim College. And part of the discussion that we want to have today with Ms. Aynur is really around that process of renewal. Because in our journey, and I think it's safe to say that Ilim College as a school would never say that we've actually achieved distinction, but we're journeying toward distinction, as would every Islamic school in Australia. But what we're hoping to benefit from today with this conversation is that journey, is the impetus for this renewal and how Ilim College has engaged with the stimulus paper, brought together colleagues across the campuses to have deep conversations about what it is that they're trying to achieve at the school. Before we jump into the discussion, we have a short video to share that I think captures this process of renewal that the school has been part of. So I'll ask my colleague Rimila to share the video, and then we'll jump into the discussion.
Sorry, just give me 1 second.
And as Ramila's finding the video, if we have any technical issues with the video, we will post the link. So if you can't hear it, we'll abort mission and post the link. Hopefully it works. And in the meantime, also, please do use this as an opportunity to capture questions, thoughts in the chat so that we can jump into the discussion when we get there.
Last year, in Term 4, we announced that we would be embarking on a journey to reimagine the future of education at Ilim College and to renew our school strategic priorities. Our faith tradition repeatedly encourages us to better ourselves, to better our service, and to check in whether we truly are doing the best we can and making the most of the gifts bestowed upon us and offering it to our school community. And most importantly, is it pleasing to Allah?
For nearly 3 decades, our core identity and purpose has remained steadfast. As Muslims, we are deeply committed to providing Islamic education and raising the best role models, just as we were when our school was first founded by Islamic community Milli Görüş in 1993. As school board member, executives, campus leadership, teams, and staff. Our dedication to this principle has strengthened, alhamdulillah. What has evolved is our way of expressing our commitment, inshallah, now in a more clear and impactful manner. This refinement in our communication does not signify a change in our path, but it rather an enrichment of how we share our beautiful values with the wide community. Alhamdulillah, there has been a great amount of strong conversation, healthy debate, deep thought, and after numerous iteration and testing, we are very excited to share with you our new vision, mission, and value statements today. First, our vision statements to raise exemplary individuals who benefit humanity is inspired by the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Khairun nas man yanfa'un nas, which translates to the best amongst mankind is one who benefits humanity.
Our mission statement to provide a welcoming and enriching environment that fosters the holistic growth of our people is about the belief in the power of a holistic approach to education, one that warmly welcomes all, enriches the spirit with Islamic education, cultivates the mind, cares for the body, and recognizes the inherent talents of each student. And we will strive every day to ensure our new school values become the heartbeat of our school community, driving our actions, decisions, and aspirations to a future where every member tries to be the best version of themselves. Based on the rich Arabic words, they spell the acronym of our core purpose, Islam. Ihsan, pursue excellence. Shukr, express gratitude. Lutf, display gentleness and care. Akhlaq, show character. Muhasaba, be accountable. In unveiling our new vision and values, we stand at a pivotal crossroad, not merely making a checkpoint in our planning cycle, but laying down the foundations for our children's future. We're not just addressing today's demands of our young, we're preparing our children for the challenges and the opportunities of tomorrow, instilling in them the universal values of Islam and striving for akhirah, seeking to please Allah and encourage a life lived with purpose and compassion.
Sister Aynur, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Let's jump right into the conversation. If you can tell us about the impetus for this this renewal, the process and the intended outcome.
Sure. Jazakallah khair, first of all, and thank you for the opportunity. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I guess the question of the impetus was pretty much what every school tends to go through, and that was we came, particularly at last year when I did start, there was a need to update our strategic plan. But what we wanted to ensure was that this time it wasn't just a checkpoint in our planning cycle, and it was just not a matter of here we've got a few more, outcomes that we'd like to achieve in the next 5 or 10 years. We felt the need to really draw back because there was a very clear awareness of our leaders of the amana that we hold, and the need to, or the realization that, or the reminder for each other that we were laying the foundations for our children's future, and that we really were at a critical juncture. So hence the need to dig deep and to, I think importantly, be skeptics of our current vision and mission statements and values, and to be honest with ourselves as to whether they held up to who we were and where we wanted to be. And we all came and were quite honest to say we actually felt that they didn't. It was just a clutter of words, and it was almost this drift that had actually occurred, that whilst as every school has them, when we don't take care of them, there was this drift away from them because people could barely remember in full sentence what they were, and yet really make reference to what they really meant and how they reflected in our day-to-day practice.
I know from our previous conversation, there was a lot of intent for the Islamic to be recentered. And I think if you can speak about how that conversation went in relation to engagement with the stimulus paper, in relation to any other, sort of deliberation, consultation that you had to inspire a recentering of the Islamic.
So I think that was a most interesting part of the conversation when we really asked where we were and where we'd like to be. There was this sense that when we established, of course, this need to really be very open and explicitly name that we're an Islamic college in an Islamic faith and that it's all about Islamic education, something along those lines. And there was this real big question about, well, do we really need to ensure that we name that? And whilst there was this sense that, yes, we need to be very clear about who we are and absolutely not apologetic about our identity, it was more about how does that relate to the world we actually live in? But most importantly, what does that really mean? And are we really reflective? And how might we utilize or come together with an actual vision statement that really gives a broad sort of understanding of who we are, to reflect that our values ultimately are universal, but at the same time, the decision that we made was that, as you can see in our vision and mission statements, that the Islamic school or Islamic definition is not necessarily open or covered there, but rather we really made a conscious decision to say, or ask the question more, what makes an Islamic college an Islamic college? And where we landed really was this sense that it's our actions that really define whether we are Islamic or not. Hence the need to really focus on then ensuring that our values came out as to who we are and that they were actually action statements themselves so that we can really utilize them in everything we actually do. So there was a lot of debate, and in that video, when our chair does refer to a lot of debate, there certainly was that. There was this. It was interesting because some felt that we were taking away from the identity by taking away in our vision or mission statements by not necessarily saying that we actually are an Islamic college. But I think once we really placed it with intention to make it a part of our values, and really renew this whole sense that it's in our actions with the way we interact with each other and how we reflect who we are through our values is really what makes us an Islamic college.
Such a profound statement. What makes an Islamic college Islamic, I think, is something that we get criticized so often internally ourselves that our schools have become almost separated, dichotomized, where you've got the Islamic and the academic as two separate things, and we try to find ways of intersections. And I think even Dr. Samir's presentation has pushed us in many ways to deepen even that conception. Where do you see the next frontier, the next stage of going with this renewed mission, vision, and values for Ilim College? What do you see as the next steps at Ilim College?
Again, I think just to talk about the actual process itself, we're certainly quite excited about our new vision, mission statements and our values. But I think it's the process is something that is just as exciting, or something that we're really proud of as well. The fact that it's really set the tone or the scene for that constant renewal and that impactful, honest feedback. And I think that's just really been a very important part of our process, to really be open and honest. And hence why I think moving forward that process will inshallah continue. I think it really starts with this notion of, and that's something that really I think was highlighted in the actual stimulus paper, that understanding our students, our parents, and most importantly, our educators, that we can't just decide on values, mission statements and think that they'll just come alive by then handing it over or putting it up, in posters or including them in our publications or making big, grand, bold statements at assemblies and school events, but rather really appreciating that they're not passive recipients of these values and these mission, vision statements. And it's more about them finding their own place, and what this means to each and every school community member, I think, is really key in bringing it alive. So as part of that, we're really looking now, what does this mean for our current policies? We're literally going through our actual policies. How do we ensure that everybody takes this very seriously? That it's not just, as I said, displays and feel-good words that we actually put up, but importantly, how we as leaders can provide the enabling conditions for that actual growth. So our next upcoming strategy day, inshallah, with our staff will really be all about listening to our teachers and our non-teachers and our students as well, in how we can achieve this together. We don't have the answers for them. We'd like to hear from them in what this really means for them, and to allow them to really articulate on what this will really look like, to ensure that our students have a say, to really be a part of this. And inshallah, the whole idea really is to be able to achieve that, I guess, moving forward, and to reflect them, is to how we actually cultivate a culture of educational inquiry and innovation at our school that really reflects who we are. We need the important key people to be a part of that, and that is, of course, our educators, our students, but let's also not forget our non-teaching staff and our administrators, our very long-standing key leaders that also are really there to provide us some amazing feedback that are also part of that schooling landscape.
Beautifully said. And I think, you know, just to connect dots here, I mean, when you have that professional dialogue with your staff at the next opportunity, and you speak about culture of inquiry, imagine asking them the question that Dr. Samir asked, which is, which of these faculties are we nurturing in inquiry? And, you know, how are we nurturing the heart and the akal, you know, and khayal, imagination? I mean, that in itself, I think, would just really push and deepen conversations. I want to thank you both very much for this. I know it's been short. I know it's been truncated in some ways, but we have about 8 minutes left. I just want to turn to the questions that are coming in, and hopefully we have questions for both. But I guess the first one that I see is from Brother Ibrahim, who says, Salam, amazing presentation, Jazakallah khair. According to some of our scholars and their framing of different realms of existence, they speak of the human being made up of different names of God in different degrees. Is there a way to understand any of the predetermined fixed entities? And what implications does this have on our approach in education? And that's for Dr. Samir.
I've already replied to the 2 questions directed to me in the chat.
Would it be possible to give a short answer here? Because I'm not sure if everyone can see, or can they see the answers? Maybe they can.
I think they should be able to, yeah, because it's just to everyone.
Yep, should be fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. In addition to that, then, is there any other questions that might be coming in for either Sister Aynur or Dr. Samir?
Okay, there's a question I see. Which author's text would you recommend reading more about Islamic educational pedagogy? I think that's a question for you, Dr. Nadeem. Oh, classical authors. Okay, I'll have to send you. I'll have to send a list of that. If you can just email me. There's a long list. We've compiled a long list of classical authors for a project we were doing. One of our colleagues, Dr. Ibrahim Zain, and a few others, compiled a long list of classical names. So I can share perhaps maybe the list if you email me, inshallah. It's a very long one.
In addition to that, to Sister Aynur, speaking about both classical and contemporary conceptions of Islamic education, how are those conversations facilitated with staff at Ilim College?
I think at certain different levels. So it's pretty much our Islamic education staff that are really coming together. And also, of course, our staff as well. And I think what really will speed this up or really bring in some more excitement, if you like, is when we actually really start digging deep with that inquiry in terms of how our values will actually reflect that as well. So I'd say we're really at the beginning of this journey. And if I could perhaps just really add then the important stimulus paper on what a fantastic resource it really was for us as well, and the list of reading that's actually in that as well. I think just becoming familiar with the meta language is just so important, because it really gives that sense of confidence to everyone to be able to pick up that stimulus paper and really understand Islamic schooling in Australia, but also to be able to use that language in terms of where we are. And that's certainly the way we actually, as part of the actual process, have been using or utilizing the actual stimulus paper, if you like. Looking at that whole phase of, yes, Islamic schooling going through the establishment phase, the growth and the distinction phase, and just checkpointing where we feel we actually are as a school has really been a very good conversation. It's really helped us a lot in terms of reflecting on our own practices. One of the things that we also that you've noticed in our actual values, that utilising the Arabic language, not just as Arabic, we actually teach Arabic, but how we actually make that language a part of the whole school understanding of who we actually are, that reconnection to faith. Also, I think became a very important conversation for us. And I just think, I guess the next phase that we're really looking at in terms of the stimulus paper is the section about the strategy for Islamic renewal, which is really hopefully going to set in terms of where we see ourselves within that inquiry model for moving forward. So I would probably just suggest that to really think about the actual stimulus paper, its simplicity, and every section in it has really been very helpful for us.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Samir, I know that you're answering some of the questions in real time. Did you answer this one by Yusuf Ahmed as well? Maybe we end on that one.
Thank you for the presentation. How and to what extent can we employ toward care and education to revive some intelligible ways of unearthing Islamic pedagogy? Yes, so look, I think any use of techniques derived from contemporary practices must be preceded by the person who's employing these techniques must be preceded by a very deep and grounding in classical understanding, Islamic understandings of the soul, classical understandings of psychology, and the faculties, etc., because unless we have that deep traditional understanding of the inner interiority of the human being, the various levels of the soul, different faculties, etc., we won't be able to critically understand what is useful in contemporary theories and practices and what is not beneficial. So that level of discernment is extremely important, because so many practices today that seem on the surface to be harmless actually may be grounded in very problematic assumptions, and may seem benign, but actually quite dangerous. So yes, pastoral care, any practices can be beneficial, but it has to be in dialogue with and first through a grounding in classical Islamic training and tradition.
Well said.
Yeah.
Sister Aynur, if we can ask you the final question for the evening. There's 3 questions. I'll combine them into one. Sister Mafaz asks what role the Islamic department has in this journey. But to add to that, Sister Silma asked if you could unpack the process a bit more that you went through. And Brother Asad, I think, brings it all together when he says, what are some of the key ingredients for an Islamic school board and leadership to go from mission and vision, building towards successful implementation with staff on the ground and inside classrooms? So I think, they've all kind of got elements of a similar question in there.
Okay, I'll try my best. There are quite a number of questions, but just in terms of the process, we began, I guess, to begin with, I think it's really important that it is driven by the school board. And this is not just a part of governance expectations here in Victoria or in Australian schools, that the captains of the ship have got to be very aware of which destination they're heading towards. And it really does require not just deep conversations, but just a real effort in this as well, to really, when you're determining that vision and mission, that it has got to be driven by school members. And this is exactly the prerogative of school boards, not necessarily what's going on in the day-to-day operations, but let's really set that direction and that destination. And I think that's what's really been a very valuable part of the actual process as well, and something that the board members have really welcomed, though it has obviously not been that very easy and has required a lot of effort. We also engaged a consultant, Junaid Chima, who's highly experienced in strategy and understands the Islamic community context. The most important principle, I think, of the actual process was that it was inclusive, and nobody should have felt, our whole principle was that nobody should feel shut out of the process. It should be inclusive and inviting of all. Hence, we actually had a strategy email which was open to everyone, parents, students, staff, to just really reach out and let us know. We actually did also run focus groups right from year 5 all the way through to year 12, student focus groups across all campuses, teaching staff focus groups, non-teaching staff focus groups, parent focus groups. But I think the main elements to our process was really about having those deep and meaningful discussions, which is why the stimulus paper was really important in Section A, looking at those checkpoints of where we actually are. Section C, for example, the reference in terms of, okay, are we really going to be able to achieve what it is? And I think there's so many gems in there to just utilize as to where we were as part of the actual process and how we will actually move forward. And I think another important, or 3 processes or 3 elements, as I mentioned, one, to really be open, not allow anyone to feel left out, ensure that we're actually having deep and meaningful and very honest conversations, which at times means we need to name what's not working, what we've actually got wrong as schools as well, to really be able to move forward. And I think the third really important element as part of that process is to be honest, but to be kind with each other, to really be impactful. So if that kind of, is there any question do you think I've left out, Brother Nadeem?
No, I think that's perfect. That's perfect. Jazakallah khair. I know we're over time. This has been rich. I really appreciate Dr. Samir, Sister Aynur, for your time. You've made us think, both in terms of theory, but also conceptually, but also in terms of practical implementation. So really appreciate it. Looking forward to more webinars. For those of you that are on the mailing list, our next webinar will be on July 16th, inshallah, with Professor Muhammad Abdullah and Brother Abdullah Khan, speaking about our sacred amana, nurturing education, parenting, and community. The recording of this one will be available for those of you that would like to access it. And again, once again, my sincere appreciation for all of you for attending and for presenting. Take care and good night. Assalamu alaikum.
Barakallahu feekum. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Pleasure.